Princess Velara's claws clicked against the crystal floor as she walked quickly through the palace halls. Her scales were bright red with anger, and her long tail swept behind her like a weapon. The guards stepped back when they saw her coming. Everyone knew that look on the princess's face meant trouble. The Corvani princess was tall and strong, like all her people. Her race had ruled 3 star systems for over 1,000 years. They were warriors born with thick scales that could stop bullets and mines that could move objects without touching them. No other race in the galaxy was as powerful as the Corvani. Velara pushed open the heavy doors to her mother's throne room. The sound echoed through the huge space like thunder. Empress Corana sat on her golden throne, looking at glowing papers that floated in the air before her. She was even larger than her daughter, with dark blue scales that showed her great age and wisdom. "Mother, why must I marry a human?" Velara shouted. Her voice was loud and angry. The floating papers shook from the force of her words. The Empress did not look surprised. She had been waiting for this moment. She waved her hand, and the papers moved to form a circle around them. The largest paper showed the face of a human male with short black hair and serious eyes. "This is Commander Park Jiho of the human fleet," the Empress said calmly. "He will be your husband." Velara stared at the image with disgust. The human looked so small and weak. His skin was pale and soft, with no scales to protect him. He had no claws or sharp teeth. How could such a creature be worth marrying? "Look at him, Mother," Velara said, pointing at the image. "He is tiny. He has no natural weapons. He cannot even move things with his mind. Why would you want me to marry this hairless ape?" The Empress stood up slowly. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with sadness. "Because, my daughter, these hairless apes have done something no other race has ever done. They have matched our power." Velara's eyes went wide. "That is impossible. 50 years ago, when we first met the humans, we thought they were nothing," the Empress continued. "They lived on only one small planet. Their ships were slow and weak. Their weapons could barely scratch our armor. We laughed at them." The floating papers changed to show images of space battles. Velara saw Corvani ships fighting against human vessels. At first, the human ships were losing badly. But as the images continued, something changed. The human ships became faster and smarter. They started working together in ways the Corvani had never seen. 3 months ago, at the Battle of Centauri Station, 50 human ships defeated 200 of our best warships, the Empress said. They used tricks and teamwork that our generals could not understand. Commander Jiho led that battle. Velara felt sick. "Our warriors are the strongest in the galaxy. How could we lose to humans?" "Strength is not everything, daughter. The humans do not fight like us. They do not rely on individual power. They work together like insects in a hive, but with the intelligence of thinking beings. They learn from every defeat and become stronger." The Empress walked down from her throne and placed a large clawed hand on Velara's shoulder. "I have studied the humans for many years now. They are not like any race we have ever encountered. They are weak individually, but together they are unstoppable. They have spread to dozens of worlds in just 50 years. Their numbers grow every day. So we destroy them before they become too strong," Velara said. "We tried that once," the Empress replied sadly. "The war lasted 3 days. In that time, the humans destroyed half our border fleet and captured 12 planets. They did not do this with superior weapons or numbers. They did it with something we do not understand. They never gave up, even when defeat was certain." Velara looked at the image of Commander Jiho again. He still looked weak to her, but now she felt a small seed of doubt. "The human leader came to me after the battle," the Empress continued. "He did not demand surrender or tribute like a conqueror would. Instead, he offered peace. He said his people did not want to fight us. They wanted to learn from us and share the galaxy." "And you believed him?" "I had no choice. Our war computers ran thousands of battle simulations. In every single one, the humans won, not because they were stronger, but because they never stopped adapting. Every time we found a way to beat them, they found 2 ways to beat us back." The Empress moved to the great window that looked out over the capital city. Millions of Corvani lived in the crystal towers below. I will not see our people destroyed because of pride. This marriage will create an alliance between our races. Together, we can rule the galaxy in peace." "But why me?" Velara asked. "Why must I be the one? To marry a human? Because you are my daughter and the heir to the throne. The humans must know that we take this alliance seriously. And because I have read reports about Commander Jiho. He is not like the other humans." "What do you mean?" The Empress smiled for the first time. "He volunteered for this marriage. When his leaders asked, 'Who would marry an alien princess?' he stepped forward. He said he was curious about our people and our culture. He wants to understand us." Velara felt a strange feeling in her chest. Curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. "He volunteered?" "Yes, and there is something else. 3 years ago, Commander Jiho's ship was damaged in a battle with space pirates. He could have escaped alone, but he stayed to rescue the crew of a Corvani merchant ship. He saved 47 of our people, including children." The princess was quiet for a long moment. Everything she had been taught said that humans were weak and worthless, but the evidence before her eyes said something different. "When will he arrive?" she asked quietly. "In 3 days. There will be a formal ceremony to announce the engagement. You will meet him then." Velara nodded slowly. She still did not want to marry a human, but perhaps she should at least meet this Commander Jiho before making her final decision. As she left the throne room, one question kept running through her mind. If humans were really as weak as she believed, how had they become strong enough to fight the mighty Corvani Empire to a draw? Perhaps it was time to find out. 3 days passed slowly for Princess Velara. She spent most of her time in the highest tower of the palace, looking out at the sky and thinking about the human who would soon arrive. Part of her hoped his ship would have an accident or get lost in space. Then she would not have to meet him at all. But on the 3rd day, sensors detected the human fleet approaching the planet. Velara watched from her window as 5 ships appeared in the sky above the capital city. The largest ship was sleek and white, very different from the rough, heavy warships of the Corvani. Strange symbols were painted on its side in blue letters that read, UES Indomitable. The human ships landed at the royal spaceport with perfect precision. No noise, no rough movements, just smooth and quiet like birds settling on water. Velara had to admit it was impressive, though she would never say so out loud. An hour later, a messenger came to tell her that the human delegation had arrived at the palace. The formal meeting would take place in the Grand Hall in 30 minutes. Velara put on her finest ceremonial armor, golden plates that covered her chest and shoulders with jewels that matched the color of her red scales. She walked to the Grand Hall slowly, trying to delay the meeting as long as possible. When she reached the great doors, she could hear voices inside speaking in the human language. The guards opened the doors and she stepped inside. The Grand Hall was huge, with a ceiling, so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Hundreds of Corvani nobles stood along the walls, all watching to see what would happen. At the far end of the hall, near her mother's throne, stood a small group of humans. Velara had expected them to look afraid or nervous in the presence of so many powerful Corvani warriors. Instead, they stood calmly and confidently, like they belonged there. They wore dark blue uniforms with silver buttons and strange symbols on their shoulders. In the center of the group stood Commander Park Jiho. He was taller than Velara had expected, but still much smaller than any Corvani. His hair was black and cut short, and his eyes were dark brown. His uniform was perfect, with no wrinkles or dirt despite the long journey through space. Velara walked toward the human delegation, making each step loud and heavy to show her power. The sound of her claws on the stone floor echoed through the hall. Some of the Corvani nobles smiled, expecting the humans to be frightened. But Commander Jiho did not step back or look afraid. Instead, he watched Velara approach with calm, intelligent eyes. When she stopped in front of him, he bowed deeply. It was not the bow of a servant or a defeated enemy. It was the bow of one equal greeting another with respect. "Your Highness," he said in perfect Corvani language. His pronunciation was excellent, with only a slight accent that made his words sound musical. "I am honored to meet you." Velara was surprised that he spoke her language so well, but she did not let it show. on her face. "Commander Jiho," she replied coldly. "Welcome to Corvex Prime." The formal ceremony began with Empress Korana announcing the engagement. She spoke about the alliance between their two peoples and the peace it would bring. Velara stood next to Jiho, trying not to look at him. She could smell something strange about him. Not bad, just different. Humans had a scent that was unlike any other race she had encountered. After the ceremony, there was a great feast in the dining hall. Long tables were set up with food from both cultures. The Corvani dishes were mostly meat, cooked with spices, that would burn the mouth of most other species. The human food was more varied, vegetables, grains, and things Velara had never seen before. Velara sat at the high table between her mother and Commander Jiho. She decided to test this human, to see if he was as weak as she believed. She began with small insults, comments about how humans were young and inexperienced compared to the ancient Corvani civilization. Jiho listened politely and then smiled. "You are absolutely right, Your Highness. The Corvani Empire has existed for over 1,000 years, while humans only left their home planet 75 years ago. We have much to learn from your people's wisdom and experience." His answer frustrated Velara because it was not what she expected. She tried again. "Human ships are slow and ugly compared to our vessels." "That is true," Jiho agreed. "Our ships are built for function rather than beauty. We focus on making them reliable and easy to repair. Perhaps we could learn about Corvani ship design while sharing our knowledge of human engineering." Every insult Velara threw at him, Jiho turned into a compliment or an opportunity for cooperation. It was infuriating. How could she defeat an enemy who would not fight back? During the meal, Jiho began telling stories about human colonies and exploration. He spoke about settlers who traveled to worlds covered in ice, where the temperature never rose above freezing. He told of colonies built inside asteroids, where people lived their entire lives without ever seeing a natural sky. "Why do humans do this?" Velara asked, despite herself. "Why go to places that are so difficult and dangerous?" "Because they are there," Jiho said simply. "Humans are curious. We want to see what is beyond the next star, around the next planet. Even when a world seems impossible to live on, we find a way. It is our nature." He told her about the colony on Titan Base, where humans lived beneath a sea of liquid methane. The colonists had to wear special suits every time they went outside, and one small mistake could kill them instantly. But they stayed because they were learning things that no one had ever known before. "The colonists sent a message last month," Jiho continued. "They discovered a new type of crystal that could revolutionize space travel. They were so excited they worked for 3 days straight without sleeping." "That sounds foolish," Velara said. "Why risk so much for knowledge?" "Because knowledge makes us stronger. Every human colony that succeeds teaches us something new. Every failure teaches us what not to do next time. We learn from both victory and defeat." As the evening continued, Velara found herself listening more carefully to Jiho's stories. He spoke about human soldiers who held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. He told of explorers who mapped dangerous regions of space that other races feared to enter. He described scientists who spent their lives studying problems that might take generations to solve. None of these stories made humans sound weak or cowardly. Instead, they sounded determined and brave in a way that was different from Corvani courage. After the feast, as the guests were leaving, Jiho approached Velara one more time. "Your Highness, I know this arrangement is difficult for you. It was difficult for me as well at first." "And now?" Velara asked. "Now I think it might be the beginning of something remarkable. Two very different peoples, working together instead of fighting. We could accomplish things that neither of us could do alone." That night, after Jiho and the human delegation had been shown to their rooms, Velara sat in her chamber and thought about everything she had heard. She accessed the palace computer system and began reading files about Commander Jiho and his military record. What she found shocked her. Jiho had become the youngest fleet commander in human history at age 28. He had won battles that should have been impossible to win. At the Battle of Tau Ceti, his small squadron had held off an entire pirate fleet for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. At the miracle of Proxima, his damaged ship had protected a colony ship full of civilians while fighting 3 enemy vessels at once. The reports described him as a tactical genius who could think of solutions that no one else could see. His own men loved him because he never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. He had been wounded 7 times in battle, but he always returned to duty as soon as he was able. As Velara read these reports, she began to understand that she had misjudged this human. Commander Park Ji-ho was not weak or cowardly. He was a warrior, just a different kind of warrior than she was used to. Perhaps it would be interesting to learn more about him. Princess Velara woke up the next morning with a plan. She had spent half the night reading about Commander Ji-ho, and now she wanted to see him in action. If she was going to marry this human, she needed to understand what kind of person he really was. The best way to do that was to watch him work. She sent a message to Ji-ho's rooms, inviting him to tour the palace facilities with her. It would give her a chance to test him and perhaps expose his weaknesses. Surely when he was away from the formal ceremonies and fancy dinners, his true nature would show. Ji-ho accepted the invitation immediately. They met in the main courtyard an hour after sunrise. He wore a simple gray uniform instead of his ceremonial clothes, and he looked ready for anything. Captain Kim Nari, one of his officers, came with them as an escort. "Where would you like to go first, Your Highness?" Ji-ho asked politely. "The orbital shipyards," Velara replied. "I want to see how humans work." They took a shuttle up to the massive space station that hung above the planet. The shipyard was a joint project between humans and Corvani, one of the first attempts at cooperation between their two peoples. Velara had visited it before, but only for formal inspections. Today, she wanted to see the real work being done. The shipyard was enormous, with dozens of ships in various stages of construction. Some were Corvani warships, dark and angular, with thick armor plating. Others were human vessels, sleek and smooth, with lots of small details that Velara did not understand. They walked through the main construction area, where both human and Corvani workers were building a new type of ship together. It was supposed to combine the best of both technologies, Corvani strength with human cleverness. Velara watched as the two groups worked on different parts of the project. The Corvani workers used their natural strength to move heavy pieces of metal into place. They could lift things that would require machines for humans to move. Their psychic abilities allowed them to shape metal with their minds, bending and molding it like clay. The human workers approached the same tasks completely differently. They used tools and machines for everything. Where a Corvani might lift a heavy beam with mental power, humans used cranes and pulleys. Where a Corvani would shape metal with thought, humans used lasers and computer-controlled systems. At first, Velara thought this proved that humans were weaker. They needed machines to do what her people could do with their minds and bodies. But as she watched longer, she began to see something else. The human methods were more precise. Their machines could make cuts and measurements that were perfect, down to the smallest detail. Their computer systems could calculate stress loads and material strengths instantly. Most importantly, their methods could be taught to anyone. A human worker did not need natural strength or psychic power to operate the machines. "Your people work very differently than mine," Velara observed. "Yes," Ji-ho agreed. "Corvani workers can do amazing things that humans cannot. But human methods have advantages too. Our tools and machines mean that any human can do the work, not just the strongest or most gifted ones." As they continued the tour, an alarm suddenly began ringing throughout the shipyard. Red lights flashed, and a voice announced over the speakers that there was a structural failure in Section C. Velara, and Ji-ho rushed toward the emergency. They found a crowd of workers gathered around a construction area where a massive support beam had cracked. The beam was holding up part of the ship's framework, and if it collapsed, it would crush 3 Corvani workers who were trapped underneath. The Corvani foreman was trying to use his psychic powers to hold the beam in place, but it was too heavy, even for his strong mind. Sweat ran down his scaled face as he strained with the effort. The other Corvani workers were trying to help, but there were too many obstacles in the way for them to reach their trapped friends. "Emergency systems are offline in this section," Captain Kim Nari reported, checking her handheld device. "The automated safety protocols cannot activate." Velara expected Ji-ho to step back and let the Corvani handle the crisis. After all, what could a weak human do that her people could not? Instead, Jiho studied the situation for exactly 3 seconds and then ran straight toward the danger. "Commander, what are you doing?" Captain Kim Nari called after him. "Manual override," Jiho shouted back as he climbed over debris and bent metal. "The emergency systems may be offline, but the manual controls should still work." He reached a control panel that was mounted on the wall near the damaged beam. The panel was covered with Corvani writing, but Jiho seemed to understand it. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as the beam above him groaned and shifted. "Get ready to move," he called to the trapped workers in their own language. "When I activate the backup supports, you will have maybe 10 seconds to get clear." The Corvani foreman looked at him with surprise. "Human, that panel has not been used in years. It may not work." "Then we better hope it does," Jiho replied. He pressed a series of buttons, and suddenly mechanical arms extended from the walls to support the failing beam. "Now!" Jiho shouted. "Move now!" The 3 trapped Corvani. Workers scrambled to safety just as the original beam finally gave way completely. The mechanical supports held the weight, preventing what could have been a terrible accident. The workers who had been saved gathered around Jiho, thanking him in their own language. One of them, an older Corvani with silver scales, clasped Jiho's shoulder with a massive clawed hand. "You saved our lives, human," he said. "We will not forget this." "Just doing my job," Jiho replied. But Velara could see that he was pleased by their gratitude. Later, as they continued the tour, Velara asked him about what had happened. "How did you know about the manual controls?" "I studied the shipyard." "Schematics before coming here," Jiho said. "I wanted to understand how everything worked. When I saw the emergency, I remembered seeing the backup systems in the plans, but you could have been killed if the beam had fallen." Jiho looked at her with those serious brown eyes. "Yes, but so could they. I had a chance to help, so I took it." They visited the military academy next. Here, Velara watched human and Corvani soldiers training together. It was another study in contrasts. The Corvani warriors practiced individual combat skills. They fought with claws and teeth, using their natural weapons and psychic powers to overcome opponents. Each warrior was like a one-person army, capable of incredible destruction. The human soldiers trained very differently. They worked in small groups, practicing coordination and teamwork. They used weapons and tactics that relied on communication and precise timing. Captain Kim Nari explained their methods to Velara as they watched. "A single Corvani warrior is much stronger than any human soldier," Kim Nari said. "But humans fight differently. We use teamwork and strategy to overcome stronger opponents." She showed Velara a training exercise where 5 human soldiers were facing 1 Corvani warrior in a practice battle. The Corvani was faster and stronger, but the humans moved as a unit. They communicated with hand signals and worked together to surround their opponent. In the end, they won through coordination rather than individual strength. "Interesting," Velara said. "Your people fight like they build ships, using tools and teamwork instead of natural ability." "That is our way," Kim Nari agreed. "We may not be the strongest or fastest, but we never give up, and we never leave anyone behind." That evening, Velara and Jiho had dinner together in a small private room instead of the great dining hall. Without hundreds of watching nobles, the atmosphere was more relaxed. "I have been thinking about today," Velara said as they ate. "When the accident happened at the shipyard, you did not hesitate to help. Why?" Jiho thought for a moment before answering. "Because it was the right thing to do. Those workers were in danger and I could help them. Their species did not matter." "Most humans would think the same way?" "Most humans, yes. We have a saying, 'We are all in this together.' It means that we share the same universe, the same challenges. When someone needs help, we help if we can." Velara found this idea strange but somehow appealing. In Corvani culture, strength was admired above all else. The strong ruled and the weak served. But humans seemed to believe that everyone had value, regardless of their individual power. "Tell me about your home," she said. "What is Earth like?" Jiho's face became softer when he talked about his home planet. He described blue oceans and green forests, cities full of people from many different backgrounds working together. He told her about his family, his parents, who were teachers, his younger sister who was studying to be a doctor. "My sister Hana always wanted to help people. he said. Even when we were children, she would take care of injured animals and try to heal them. Now she works at a hospital on Mars, saving lives every day. She sounds very different from Corvani healers, Velara observed. Our healers use psychic powers to mend wounds and cure diseases. Human doctors use different methods, but the goal is the same, to help others feel better. Maybe our doctors and your healers could work together and learn from each other, as The evening continued. Velara realized that her opinion of Commander Jiho was changing. He was not the weak, primitive creature she had expected. He was intelligent, brave, and genuinely caring. He had risked his life to save Corvani workers he had never met before, simply because it was right. For the first time, Princess Velara, had just begun to think that maybe marrying a human would not be so terrible when everything went wrong. It happened in the middle of the night, 3 weeks after Commander Jiho's arrival on Corvex Prime. Velara was awakened by the sound of explosions coming from the city below. She rushed to her window and saw fires burning in several places across the capital. Corvani warships were flying overhead, but they were not defending the city. Instead, they were attacking it. More explosions shook the palace. Emergency alarms began ringing throughout the building. Velara quickly put on her armor and ran toward her mother's chambers. In the hallways, she met other members of the royal family and palace guards. Everyone looked confused and frightened. "What is happening?" Velara demanded of Captain Torvin, the head of the palace guard. "Rebellion, Your Highness," he replied grimly. "General Mordak has taken control of the planetary defense grid. He is demanding that you renounce the marriage alliance with the humans and join his movement." Velara felt her blood turn cold. General Mordak was her father's older brother, a war hero who had never approved of making peace with humans. He believed that Corvani were superior to all other races and should rule the galaxy alone. "Where is my mother?" Velara asked. Captain Torvin's face became even more serious. "The Empress was injured in the first attack. General Mordak's forces hit the medical wing with explosives. She is alive but badly hurt." Velara ran through the damaged corridors toward the medical center. She found her mother lying on a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and medical equipment. The Great Empress looked smaller and weaker than Velara had ever seen her. "Mother," Velara said, kneeling beside the bed. Empress Korana opened her eyes slowly. "Velara, my daughter, you must listen to me carefully. Mordak has turned many of our people against the Alliance. He tells them that marrying you to a human is a betrayal of our race." "What do we do?" Velara asked. "The palace is surrounded. Most of our guards have either joined Mordak or been captured. Communications are cut off. We cannot call for help." "Commander." Jiho appeared in the doorway of the medical center. His usual calm expression was replaced by one of grim determination. Captain Kim Nari and Lieutenant Lee Minho were with him, along with 2 other human soldiers. "Your Majesty, Your Highness," Jiho said, bowing quickly. "My people and I are at your service." "Commander, you should leave while you can," Empress Korana said weakly. "This is not your fight. General Mordak will kill any humans he finds." "With respect, Your Majesty, I disagree. An attack on the royal family is an attack on the Alliance. That makes it our fight, too." Captain Torvin looked at the small group of humans with doubt. "Commander, there are only 5 of you. General Mordak has hundreds of warriors and control of all the defense systems. Numbers are not everything," Jiho replied. "We need to get to the central control room and shut down the defense grid. Once we do that, loyal forces outside the city can come to help." "Impossible," Captain Torvin said. "The control room is in the center of the palace, surrounded by Mordak's best fighters. It would be suicide." "Maybe," Jiho agreed, "but it is still our best chance." Velara looked at this human who was willing to risk his life for her family. 3 weeks ago, she had thought he was weak and cowardly. Now she saw something different in his eyes, the same determination she had read about in his military records. "I am coming with you," she announced. "Absolutely not," Jiho said firmly. "You are too important. If something happens to you, the Alliance dies with you. And if I hide here while others fight for my throne, I am not worthy to be Empress anyway," Velara replied. "Besides, I know this palace better than anyone. You will need me." Jiho studied her face for a moment and then nodded. Very well, but you follow my orders during the mission. Can you do that? I can try, Velara said. They left Empress Korana in the care of the medical staff and loyal guards. The assault team consisted of Jiho, Captain Kim Nari, Lieutenant Lee Minho, 2 human soldiers named Park Woo-jin and Choi Hyun-woo, and Princess Velara. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would use maintenance tunnels and service corridors to reach the control room without being seen. Once there, they would overpower the guards and shut down the defense grid. Moving through the palace was like traveling through a war zone. They could hear gunfire and explosions in the distance as Mordak's forces fought with the remaining loyal guards. Bodies of both rebels and defenders lay in the corridors they passed. Velara led them through passages she had played in as a child, routes that most adults had forgotten. The humans moved silently behind her, communicating with hand signals and staying alert for danger. They were halfway to their destination when they encountered their first enemy patrol. 6 rebel Corvani warriors were checking the corridors ahead. Each warrior was armed with plasma rifles and wore heavy combat armor. Lieutenant Lee Minho spotted them first and signaled the others to stop. They hid behind a corner while Jiho quickly assessed the situation. Too many for a direct fight, he whispered to the others. We need a distraction. I could challenge them to combat, Velara suggested. As a princess, they would be honor-bound to accept. No, Jiho said. There has to be another way. He studied the corridor layout and noticed something above them. A heavy decorative light fixture hanging from the ceiling. He pointed it out to his team and made several quick hand signals. What happened next was like a carefully planned dance. Park Woo-jin used a small explosive charge to weaken the fixture's supports. Kim Nari created a noise at the far end of the corridor to draw the guards' attention. When they moved to investigate, Choi Hyun-woo triggered the charges. The massive light fixture crashed down, blocking the corridor and trapping the guards on the other side. They were not hurt, but they could not follow the assault team. Clever, Velara admitted as they continued toward the control room. They encountered 2 more patrols on the way, but each time Jiho found a way around them without fighting. He used the palace's own systems against the rebels, overloading power circuits to create darkness, activating fire suppression systems to create confusion, even using the communication system to send false orders that led guards away from their path. Finally, they reached the central control room. Through a window, they could see General Mordak himself standing at the main control panel. He was enormous even by Corvani standards, with black scales that looked like armor and scars from many battles. With him were 8 of his best warriors. Now what? Lieutenant Lee Minho asked quietly. There is no way to sneak up on them in there. Jiho studied the room layout through the window. The control room was circular with the main control panel in the center. There were only 2 entrances, the main door they were looking through and an emergency exit on the far side. We need to divide their attention, he said finally. Princess, is there another way into that room? Velara thought carefully. The ventilation system. There are maintenance shafts that connect to the control room, but they are very small. Only a child could fit through them. Or a human, Kim Nari said with a grin. The new plan was even more dangerous than the first. Kim Nari and Choi Hyun-woo would use the ventilation shafts to enter the room from above. Meanwhile, Jiho, Lee Minho, Park Woo-jin, and Velara would create a distraction at the main entrance. When everyone was in position, Jiho activated the door controls and stepped into the control room. General Mordak turned toward him with a roar. General Mordak turned toward Commander Jiho with a roar of rage that shook the entire control room. The massive Corvani warrior was even more frightening up close, with battle scars covering his black scales and eyes that burned with hatred. "Human dares to enter my presence," Mordak bellowed. "You are the disease that infects our pure bloodline. I will crush you like the insect you are." Jiho stood calmly in the doorway, his hands empty and raised to show he carried no weapons. Behind him, Velara could see Lieutenant Lee Minho and Park Woo-jin waiting for the signal to attack. Above them, Captain Kim Nari and Choi Hyun-woo were moving through the ventilation shafts. "General Mordak," Jiho said in a clear voice, "I challenge you to single combat." The words echoed through the control room. Even the rebel warriors looked surprised. Challenging a Corvani general to personal combat was either very brave or very stupid. Mordak laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You? Challenge me? I have killed hundreds of enemies in battle. I have conquered planets with my bare claws. What could a weak human possibly do against me? Maybe nothing, Jiho admitted. But I have to try. If I win, you surrender and end this rebellion. If you win, you can kill me and continue your war. And why would I agree to this farce? Mordak asked. Because you believe Corvani are superior to humans in every way. Here is your chance to prove it in front of your followers. Or are you afraid that a weak human might surprise you? Mordak's eyes blazed with fury. You dare question my courage? Very well, human. I accept your challenge. When I am finished with you, I will use your bones to decorate my throne. The general walked to the center of the room, his claws extending from his fingers like knives. He was twice Jiho's size and probably 10 times stronger. His scales could stop bullets, and his psychic powers could crush a normal person's mind. Jiho stepped forward to meet him. He looked tiny compared to the Corvani warrior, but his face showed no fear. Velara watched from the doorway, her heart beating fast. She wanted to help, but she knew this was something Jiho had to do alone. Begin! Mordak roared and lunged forward with incredible speed. What happened next was unlike any fight Velara had ever seen. Mordak attacked with the fury of a natural predator, his claws slashing through the air where Jiho had been standing a moment before. But the human was no longer there. Jiho moved like water, flowing around Mordak's attacks instead of trying to block them. He was much faster than the general expected. When Mordak swung his massive fist, Jiho ducked under it and struck at the Corvani's knee. When Mordak tried to grab him, Jiho rolled away and came up behind him. Stand still and fight like a warrior, Mordak bellowed, frustrated by his inability to land a hit. I am fighting like a human, Jiho replied calmly. The battle continued for several minutes. Mordak was stronger and had natural weapons, but Jiho was smarter and faster. He used the general's own anger against him, making him careless and wild. Every time Mordak missed an attack, Jiho struck back at weak points in the Corvani's defenses. Slowly, Mordak began to tire. His attacks became slower and less accurate. Jiho, meanwhile, seemed to be getting faster and more precise. He was studying his opponent, learning his patterns and weaknesses. Finally, Jiho saw his chance. Mordak raised both claws above his head for a devastating downward strike. For a moment, the general's chest was unprotected. Jiho stepped forward and drove his fist directly into Mordak's solar plexus with all his strength. The blow would not have hurt a human very much, but Jiho had studied Corvani anatomy. He knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. Mordak doubled over in pain, gasping for breath. Before the general could recover, Jiho grabbed a piece of broken equipment from the floor and struck Mordak behind the head. The massive Corvani warrior collapsed to the ground unconscious. The rebel warriors in the room stared in shock. Their invincible leader had been defeated by a human half his size. Some of them reached for their weapons, but Captain Kim Nari and Choi Hyunwoo dropped down from the ceiling behind them. Nobody move, Kim Nari ordered, pointing her weapon at the stunned rebels. The fight is over. Velara ran into the room and immediately went to the control panel. She began shutting down the defense grid that had kept the palace isolated. Outside, they could hear the sound of loyal Corvani forces approaching to restore order. It is finished, she announced. The rebellion is over. The next few hours passed. In a blur of activity, loyal guards arrested the rebels and restored security to the palace. Empress Korana was moved to a better medical facility where human and Corvani doctors worked together to heal her injuries. General Mordak was taken to a prison cell to await trial. As the sun rose over the capital city, Velara found Jiho standing on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. He had bandages on his arms and face from the fight, but he seemed calm and peaceful. You saved my family and my throne, Velara said as she joined him. I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to thank me, Jiho replied. I did what any decent person would do? No, Velara said firmly. What you did was extraordinary. You faced an enemy who should have been able to kill you easily, and you found a way to win. That is not something any person could do. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city come back to life below them. palace workers, were already repairing the damage from the battle. Human and Corvani soldiers worked side by side to restore order. "I have been thinking," Velara said finally, "about our marriage, about the alliance between our peoples." "And what have you decided?" Jiho asked. "I have decided that my mother was right. Humans and Corvani are very different, but maybe that is a good thing. Your people have qualities that mine lack: cleverness, adaptability, the ability to work together, and perhaps we have things to offer you as well. Such as strength, experience, knowledge of the galaxy that comes from 1,000 years of exploration. Together, we might accomplish things that neither of us could do alone." Jiho smiled, the first truly happy expression she had seen on his face since he arrived. "I think you might be right." 6 months later, the wedding took place in the same grand hall where they had first met. But this time, the ceremony was different. Instead of a political arrangement forced on both of them, it had become a celebration of genuine partnership and respect. Velara wore traditional Corvani ceremonial armor, but she also carried a bouquet of earth flowers that Jiho had brought from his home planet. Jiho spoke his vows in both languages, promising not just political alliance but personal loyalty and care. The guests included both human and Corvani officials, many of whom had worked together during the reconstruction after the rebellion. Dr. Songhana, Jiho's sister, had come from Mars to attend the wedding. She spent most of the reception talking with Corvani healers about combining human medical technology with Corvani's psychic healing abilities. After the ceremony, Velara and Jiho boarded a ship bound for their first joint mission. They were going to establish a new colony on a planet at the edge of known space, where humans and Corvani would live and work together as equals. As their ship jumped into hyperspace, Velara reflected on how much her life had changed. 3 months ago, she had been a proud princess who believed her people were superior to all others. Now she was the wife of a human commander, and she was excited about the future they would build together. "What are you thinking about?" Jiho asked, sitting beside her in the ship's observation lounge. "I was remembering the question I asked my mother," Velara replied. "Why must I marry a human? Now I think I know the answer." Which is, because sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never expected. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms, and that working together is better than standing alone. Jiho took her hand in his, careful of her claws. "I learned something too. I learned that being different does not mean being enemies. Your people and mine may never be exactly alike, but we can be partners." Outside the ship's windows, stars streaked past as they traveled toward their new home. It would be a world where two very different species would try to build something better together than either could create alone. And for the first time in her life, Princess Velara, now Commander Velara, was looking forward to the future with hope instead of fear.